There's just 1 minute to showtime.
The engines are on.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
When they wrote up the systems and the rule set that we use, did working people get to write a line? What class of men on pen and paper jotted down their clues? With capital, the heart of their design. When 90 million want a thing, but some shareholders say no. Which class of people get to have their way? The people read the fine print, say that this thing has got to go, and we'll start writing a new contract here today. Don't you know that hundreds will work and one man keeps the money? They don't think they gotta tell us why. When they say the new social contract, all the bosses will be gobsmacked and everyone will want a sign. Oh, yeah, everyone will want a sign.
Okay, it always takes a few minutes to get everything rocking and rolling, but if you've been keeping score at home, you probably already know that. So thank you for being with us today on this new episode of Social Contract. I am Nicolette, and I'm here with our illustrious friend and co-host, Mr. Mayor Jared.
What's going on, my friends? Good morning, good morning.
Good morning on the West Coast. He's West Coast, I'm East Coast. So afternoon to you all on the East Coast. Hello wherever you are, or if you're watching this on rebroadcast, which you can do on all of our platforms, which is lucky for you. So we always kind of come on with a good attitude about what's going on and try to approach things with a good attitude, but it couldn't probably be worse right now for a lot of the world, either abroad or domestically, being that, people here are dealing with, obvious climate crisis situation, bordering at this point on climate collapse. It's fires in the Northwest. It's hurricanes in the South, and you wouldn't necessarily realize it, but hurricanes also, maybe you do now, hurricanes also impact the East and the Midwest. When the hurricanes break up, they break up right over Indiana and Illinois sometimes. So it's not just a singular event like, oh, Florida, whatever, Florida, who cares about Florida? You live there on purpose. Not necessarily the case. So we've got a lot of bad stuff going on here. We've got a lot of bad stuff going on in the Middle East. And as you know, this is the anniversary. Yesterday was, but we're essentially on the year anniversary of the newest Israeli campaign of terror, which has usurped the borders of its own colony and is now breaching Lebanon and neighboring areas as part of the greater Israel plot, whatever you like to call it. So we're going to talk about that kind of stuff today, and also a potential solution to at least some of the domestic problems, such as the natural disasters, and that would be UBI, or also known as Universal Basic Income. And it's something that is, from our point of view, a little pie in the sky. But we hope to see that as people become more aware that our government is, running away with the funds that should be supporting us domestically in a lot of ways, and a lot of us are not living the lives that we want to be living or have the healthcare that we'd like to have, that there are a lot of other things that we feel like we should be rerouting the attention to and supporting and getting behind. So we'll be talking about that, what it is, what it isn't, and how in particular it can impact natural disaster victims and help them, get out of the path of destruction before, which is a big issue, because people often, especially the poorest and most vulnerable people, they don't have anywhere to go, they don't have anywhere to stay, they can't afford hotels. The airlines are allowed to inflate prices, And they've got animals. They've got large animals. Sometimes their bosses won't let them leave. What they say, go get supplies with what money? Maybe their SNAP benefits haven't come in yet. So there's a lot of issues that are meant to when they say, if you stay, you're going to die. Write your birth date and your name on your arm. Well, fuck you guys. Do something about it. So that's where we are right now.
Yeah, you have people who are there's a lot of various areas. I'm just hearing this from people that I personally know, where there just is not gas. So if you want to evacuate, what do? Get in your car, hope your gas lasts long enough to sit through the possibly 12 hours of traffic you're gonna you're just as likely to get hit by the hurricane while you're in your car waiting to try to evacuate or run out of gas while doing that. And then where are you going?
And something that is a little I'm not sure about the entire South, the infrastructure of the entire South, but in Florida, they really don't have outside roads. They have the main roads, and that's it. Because if you come from the Midwest or the Northeast or, in a lot of other places that are much older, more established, there are back roads everywhere. You can be like, oh, the highway's closed. I'll go to this little highway. Oh, that one's backed up too. I'll go to the side street. Oh, that one's backed up too. I'll go to the side street. There's so many streets, like in Indiana, especially, and then in the Midwest. Obviously there are blank spots, but there are just so many options to a lot of the more northerner areas. But in Florida, that's why the traffic backs up the way it is. There are only, so many roads that you can't just go drive off into nothing like you can in a lot of other locations. So that's why you end up on the road for that long. And is it really worth it to try to sit in the traffic when you weren't allowed off of work anyways? And we all heard about the plastics factory, the most important plastics factory that we were watching to make sure the really bad part wasn't coming, and they were given a total few minutes to leave if they wanted to. So
you just imagine a world where we have here's yet another reason that having not just specifically trains but multiple modes of transportation open can be a good thing. Imagine if instead of looking at pictures of entirely packed highways, we instead have Amtrak's running every single possible car they have is just going in a big circle to Florida right now, just packing people in, getting them back, and then they're delivered at some kind of place to stay, and you can just imagine a universe where it's not that the government's going to handle frickin' everything, but it's just no one even appears to be trying. It's kind of good luck out there, everybody. Anyway, fill out this form if you survive it, and maybe you'll get a FEMA check. Never, exactly.
Or we might hook you up with one of those formaldehyde trailers that you can die in slowly. So hello to the chat. Are you time traveler too? Says, yeah, and your car can overheat, no back roads. Exactly. So that's, there are not, when people in other locations are like, well, why can't they just, there's a lot of reasons but the headline is, if they could, they would. So do not blame the people that stay behind. Do not blame the people.
The entire state of Florida is supposed to evacuate in 48 hours, which also is just
off of 2 roads.
Even if everything was great and we had all the things we just mentioned, it would still be quite an effort to do that.
I mean, you guys realize how packed Florida is? Everybody lives there. That's the thing. Probably a major, I don't know the real numbers. That's not my job. Look it up. But probably a massive percentage of people that, it is super, super packed there compared to some other locations that are, just not as full. So, there's the idea of evacuation plus, the idea that okay, maybe people could take airlines. They're jacking the prices. Every survey, I don't even know why that's allowed. First of all, they shouldn't even exist. When they needed bailed out the 100 other times that they needed bailed out, and all the failures that they've done, and now that they opened the whistleblowers, that shit should have been nationalized yesterday. That is
of state ownership, where you could prevent that kind of thing if you had any kind of control over these. But it's just random private companies, and they're entirely unwilling to yank the leash when things get out of hand. You could even do some all right, we're doing an emergency takeover of airlines. Here we go. If you live in Florida,
and a functioning government would do that. And the government, here's the thing: the government functions just fine, but they function for themselves and their own self-interest. So, what does saving poor people do? We've said this multiple times. The government, our government, does not value the lives of poor people. It has been demonstrated over and over and over again. And that the reason why is because They may or may not vote. They don't contribute. If you're a certain amount of like below a certain earning bracket, you don't even pay taxes because you're too poor. They need social services that we should all be entitled to. So they are looked at as like essentially like a scourge, like a blight on society. And then they get the media and these internet trolls to do their bidding about it, to say, oh yeah, poor people, it's poor people and immigrants. They're eating the dogs and they're bringing in syphilis or what the crap ever, that's where we are here. We are in a stage of what I've been calling runaway capitalism. I don't like to say the term in stage capitalism, because that implies that we are at the end of it, and it's going to get so much worse. We're going to, by 2050, we're talking about like the Snake Plissken future. Like we are going to blow right past like Blade Runner. It's going to go right into the Escape From world, because everything is hell, and it's getting worse, and it's not going to get better until more people are affected by these things. Because it's still, even though it looks like these natural disasters are really affecting people, it's not really. If you look at the size of the United States, there are so many people who are unaffected by this or anything, who have good jobs, who have health care through their job, who don't they live in a nice community, they can afford a house, they can have kids. These people are like, oh, if these people would just, if they would only just, if they could just, that's not a thing for poor people. And every day there are becoming more impoverished people who don't have access to food or health care or a decent paycheck. The government is allowing this to happen because these corporations essentially own them, and it's going to continue to get worse. Combine that with these now anti-homelessness laws, then you end up with people incarcerated and then having to work by forced labor, as we're starting to hear. But let's there's your headline, so let's backtrack a little bit. And I believe Jared had a quote.
Just before we exit the Florida talk, I did want to, just in case people are wondering what the political class is doing in this, what they're thinking about. So we have Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said Monday that it was delusional for Vice President Harris to accuse him of political gamesmanship after reports emerged that he did not take the Democratic presidential nominee's calls as his state braces for Hurricane Milton. And maybe a second reading here will bring a thing to light, but it seems that this is entirely a fight over taking a phone call. It's not like we have all these solutions ready to go and DeSantis is stopping them. And exactly the opposite. DeSantis has all these solutions and Harris is stopping. It's neither of those. It really just seems to be what they're complaining about, the politicization of a thing.
They've been through this so many times, now they're just like, fuck it, figure it out on your own.
DeSantis said in a Fox News interview Monday evening that he is leveraging all resources available, including from the federal government, to prepare for Hurricane Milton's expected landfall Wednesday evening, adding that he has been in touch with both President Biden and FEMA in preparation. It did strike me reading this where, depending on who you're talking to, it bounces back and forth between why are you criticizing Harris for what's happening now? She's just the vice president, and stuff like this, which is why is the vice president if she's just the vice president and has no power and we don't care, and she should not be in any way held responsible for anything this administration is doing? Why is she making calls to Governor DeSantis? Why is she doing it at all? Why does he need to talk to her? Which is probably what he would say, because that's how you spin it from the other direction. Oh yeah, here he is. She has no role in this. In fact, she's been vice president for 3.5 years. I've dealt with a number of storms under this administration. She has never contributed anything to any of these efforts. And so what I think is selfish is her trying to blunder into this, he continued. And you know what? Governor Ron DeSantis, in this case, in this very specific thing, I think you're entirely correct.
Yeah, right? Damn it, that's always the thing where it's where somebody is making fun of Trump for something that, they're obviously getting wrong, and I'm don't make me be in a position to defend him! God damn it!
She's apparently done both nothing and everything, depending on which makes sense in the conversation you're having. But what was it? Her one thing was she was the border czar, and then if you say that, they're like, that's Russian propaganda. She's never the border czar. She was never in charge of anything. And then
she wasn't even a cop. That's not real.
She wasn't a cop. She wasn't a prosecutor. She's never done anything in her life. And then you'll be like, well, then how is she qualified to do anything if she's never done it? You hate women, and it's
yeah, you hate women and immigrants and success stories, and you hate cute shoes.
success stories. Can't this just be a nice Disney princess story where
Right.
wbecause Kamala
And
gets
these
to be the
people,
president?
these blind supporters, I think the thing that floors me the most about all of it is because people always are on the left like, why don't you ever come up against conservatives? Because they're low hanging fruit. Whatever they believe is stupid, it doesn't count in this conversation. Democrats should know better because they want to oppose it. But taking the Hillary approach to this and courting the right and forgetting about everybody else is going to be a potential disaster here. But the thing that I think is the most shocking is that people will say or claim that she's saying and doing things that aren't remotely true. They have just projected what they want on her, and it's like, can you people not see that, like, you just want to live, and she's not part of that, and she's not going to do anything about it. And when Biden said like 4 years ago nothing was going to fundamentally change, it hasn't, and it's actually gotten worse for most people.
Lewis Black had a routine where he would say that the the Democrat Party is a party of no ideas, and the Republican Party is a party of bad ideas.
Yeah.
And that's just flopped now, where now you have the Democratic Party as a party of bad ideas, and the Republican Party has nothing. That's my major criticism for the entire right is there is no plan being offered. They will be like, man, it's really, really messed up how they're dealing with your health care and all these other issues. And it's like, what is your plan, though? And they're like, well, we need to improve things. What is the plan to improve things? Things are real bad. It's like, yeah, man, I get that much. But you are offering absolutely nothing in alternative other than to point out that thing is bad, which is what I get accused of doing.
Right? Yeah. That's like, on the left, we get like that. We take a lot of heat for not going after them as much, and it's like, well, what is there to go after? They're not, everything they think of is bad, so we don't have to. It's low hanging fruit. But but when you end up in a situation where there's no opposition party and they're just two wings of the same bird, then this is how we end up in this whole austerity plan, and the way that liberals just jumped all over, like, oh, she's gonna build the border wall. Oh my God, 4 years ago, you people were losing your fucking minds over building a border wall. But it's insane. It's truly insane to see the way that people are responding to the Democrats. And
you have Republicans saying that they're going to stop taxing people's tips. And I'm like, okay. And then you have Kamala Harris saying she's going to give you $10,000 to buy a house, and I'm like, neither of these things are going to happen, right? Like, everyone understands that on some level, right? That even if they campaigned last time on legal weed, forgiving student loans, all health, like, they campaigned on some stuff to get into office this time, and none of it happened. No. So, like, why are we lending any kind of weight to what people say before the election? And then when you look at what they're offering, it's like, man, you gotta lie, but you're lying anyway. Why don't you lie bigger? Like, make some bigger shit up that you're not gonna do. Even the stuff they're making up they're not gonna do is like not even half measures, quarter measures, eighth measures.
Yeah, like nothing that matters anyways. And we all know this is that, and we were talking about this before the show, that we know that they're telling you that straight up Biden comes out and goes, we on the day that they had just sent $8.7 billion more to Israel to kill people, they outside of their colony, Biden goes on the news and says, no more money for FEMA. We've quote given them all that we've got. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like, you're who has that much fucking balls to say something like that? And like, yeah, they like made them come back into session or whatever because they're on vacation like always, or what, blah blah blah. But the fact of the matter is that there's this sort of cognitive dissonance. That's some of the words that where what we're seeing and what we're being told are two different things. Because we were just talking about this, how it was either CBS or ABC News in conjunction with YouGov just did a series of polls where they were asking people here that if they were in America and in Britain, what they thought about their thought of Israel, if they were trying to spare the lives of Palestinians, if we should keep funding them, such and such and such. And overwhelmingly, their results showed that people, Americans and Britons, thought that we should keep supporting them, that they were doing a good job, blah, 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 blah. Well, as I've said many times, I have been on YouGov for years. I never was sent that poll. They know I've filled it out several times that I've never said that I'm a Republican or a Democrat, but I'm other, and I always say socialist. So I get passed over for a lot of these things. And I see other people getting these certain polls that I am specifically being excluded from and know that I'm being excluded from. So they are cherry picking their information so that when they put that out in the media, they make it seem like, well, then everybody's doing really good then, and Israel probably isn't a bad thing, and they're probably good guys and whatever. And but when you talk to people, you find out that everybody's like, I heard about that money. I know these billions of dollars are going to Israel to kill people. Even if they're only just mainstream news followers and are taking that narrative, which is, a shill for all of this, for the government and for what they're gaining through doing all of this. So, and then we come up here on this year of just this newest terror campaign. And if you think about it, Israel has been starting shit with, trying to take over Palestine since what, like 1947, 1948. So, but they've never managed to actually really do it, right? So what's the difference right now? Obviously, now that they're usurping their borders, and we're hearing about the Greater Israel Plan that we talk about all the time. So obviously, they need somebody to bankroll this situation, which we know is happening, because Congress keeps giving them money. So if we as an entity, America, as a business, would not be investing into this situation, did we not think we were going to get a bountiful return? So it's very easy to see how America is behind this Greater Israel concept in order to gain complete control of the Middle East, basically turn it into a military base, and have all the resources, all the land, all of the everything at America's control and disposal, while using Netanyahu as a scapegoat, who he himself maybe doesn't even realize the extent of the plan, that he's going to get Gaddafi any day now, and they're just going to be like, he was bad, here's a good guy, and shove it, as Zelensky into his place. So that's where we are at this stage of, like, what you have, if you connect the dots of commerce, it's like, why is it so successful now? Is Lebanon being attacked, and why are we allowing them to poke the bear with Iran? Because Iran has always been a thorn in America's side, even though they exist in their own right just as well as they should. Same with Saudi Arabia. That doesn't mean they're good places or they're, these bastions of goodwill, but it does mean that they have our country with their own economies and their own sovereignty. And where Israel had failed before, suddenly they're able to just take over the region. And, it's it's exasperating. So that's the thing. Like, we've been at this for so long. It feels like you're just like, yelling into the void and not getting anywhere. And and when you see polls like that come out, you wonder, like, is this the real feel of people? Is this an accurate depiction of how people really feel, or is this skewed information to try to let people to sow doubt among other people, to make them think, well, if other people think it's okay, then it must be okay. If the news says it's okay, then it must be true.
At this point, I think polls should be taken essentially as like news pieces. Like, not, I hate if you throw around the word propaganda too often, people think you're a crazy person, but it's used more for like narrative sculpting than anything. I think the tactic genuinely is because how do you whip people up to go vote? Well, if you think your guy's going to lose and you get in like a panic about it, I still firmly believe that Kamala Harris is going to be declared the winner, whether it's through like weird electoral college nonsense or otherwise. And I think that part of the point of the poll saying, oh my God, she's losing so bad, is to make people go, ah, shit, we better give her a bunch of money and start knocking on doors for her or something.
It's hard to tell. And that's also, we are here because we are looking beyond that narrative, and we're saying, like, no, guys, look at the obvious. Like, this doesn't make sense. These numbers don't number. But the thing of it is, it's like, we are also beholden to these polls and this information. Like, there's no other way to know if it's true or not. So we have to just cast doubt on it, but not actually know for sure. Like, we can't quote you some, other study or other information that's, scalable or testable or whatever, because we also don't know. Nobody here knows. Again, when it comes to propaganda, it also is like you're stuck behind this wall of propaganda of not knowing what's true and what's not. So that's
One
essentially.
thing that I do know is true is that regardless of whoever wins, not whoever, regardless if if some insane thing happened and like Jill Stein became president, you know what? Even if Jill Stein became president, I think somehow still we'd end up funding Israel just as much as we do now. But I know that if either major party candidate, if either uniparty candidate wins, Israel will receive as much funding as I say as it wants, but that kind of like perpetuates the idea that Israel somehow has power over the United States. When it's the reverse, we use it as like a vassal state. It's basically an excuse to, instead of money laundering, it's like human right crime laundering. It wasn't us that did it. It's Israel, and they're defending themselves and whatever nonsense we've built up. Anyway, we're gonna keep churning over our largest GDP producers, BlackRock and GE, and them, so they can make more bombs. We got to get rid of these bombs by sending them to this conflict, and Ukraine isn't really working out really well right now. So now it's Israel, and if this one stops working out, it's going to be Taiwan, and then who knows from there what's going to happen. But I want to read directly the words of the lady herself, because I keep hearing about how if I don't like the genocide, I should vote for Kamala because somehow it'll be a nicer form of the genocide. I just want people to remember where her head actually is and what she actually says. Because does she have a policy platform or anything on her website? She doesn't have many specifics, so like, listen to what she actually says or what her speechwriters have her say in an online statement. This came out yesterday because it's October 8th. I will never forget the horror of October 7th, 2023. 1,200 innocent people, including 46 Americans, were massacred by Hamas terrorists. Women raped on the side of the road. 250 people kidnapped. It was the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. What Hamas did that day was pure evil. It was brutal and sickening. It has rekindled a deep fear among the Jewish people, not just in Israel, but in the United States and around the world. The long, extraordinary arc of Jewish history is full of pogroms and prejudice, slaughter and separation. And now, in our own generation, there is another moment that the world must never forget. I am devastated by the loss and pain of the Israeli people as a result of the heinous October 7 attack. Doug and I pray for the families of the victims and hope they find solace in remembering the lives their loved ones lived. So, I just want to remind people, she talks about all these rapes that were happening. So this is Al Jazeera, which I know the name Al Jazeera you expect, they're like super pro-Palestine. It's like, and not really. They're still absolutely allowed to operate within like the Western media sphere. So they're not like the hard slant anti-Israel thing that you might expect just by the name Al Jazeera. It's also Al Jazeera US. Al Jazeera's investigative unit, I-Unit, great name, investigative unit, has carried out a forensic analysis of the events of October 7th, when Hamas fighters launched an incursion into Israel that's transformed the politics of the Middle East, reveals widespread human rights abuses of Hamas, follows comprehensive list of those killed. But the investigation by I-Unit, which examined hours of footage from CCTV dash cams, personal phones, hand cams of killed Hamas fighters, have found that many of these stories came out in the days of the following the attack were false. These include claims of atrocities such as the mass killing and beheading of babies. I'm kind of shocked Kamala didn't do the beheaded babies thing, because that was debunked so quick. Like, that was debunked the same day. Yeah. Like, by October 7th, 7 p.m., that was debunked. I'm kind of surprised, because who was it? Biden was saying that on TV just a couple of months ago. And systemic rape, stories that were used repeatedly by politicians in Israel and the West to justify the ferocity and subsequent bombardment of the Gaza Strip, which has so far killed nearly 32,000 people.
Probably much, much more, actually. You can only count them.
I use the lower numbers because you don't want to get accused of exaggerating. If anything, you're going in the opposite direction, and in 5-10 more years, we're going to find out, it was actually 100,000 people they killed. Yeah. After a thorough analysis of all available data, the I-Unit concluded that claims by the Israeli army that it found 8 burned babies in the house of the kibbutz Balbao are untrue. I'm looking for the rape one here. There was one of a number of incidents where the police and army appeared to have killed Israeli citizens. The I-Unit identified 19 such victims, but the true figure is likely to be higher. Like, you find, there was a New York Times article called "Screams Without Words" that was written by a lady and her fucking cousin, and like neither of them had any kind of credential. They hadn't been to it was just a pure hit piece put out that was just torn apart by even the mainstream media went after that, and that's where the whole there were a billion rapes. Like that's where that comes from. That's like the sourced thing. And then like the source evidence of that is we came across this female corpse and her pelvis was pulverized. And it's like, well, the damage to this corpse appears consistent with getting hit by a tank shell. And it's like, does Hamas have tanks? No. If they did, they wouldn't have come over in hang gliders with AKs. They would have used the tanks. So, like, if anybody was killed by a tank on October 7th, it has to have been the IDF. Like, unless frickin' Hamas was going over and, like, I don't know, they'd take over a tank and then shoot a lady with it and then...
I think we'd be hearing about that. We'd have heard about it. I don't think they would have kept that one a secret. So.
There is evidence all over it's called the Hannibal Directive. It's the directive where in the event of, if you have the opportunity to kill Hamas, even if they're surrounded by Israeli toddlers, you should take that shot and kill everybody out. And as long as you get at least one Palestinian there, it's totally fine. And that was in full effect on the day, on October 7th. And many of these like supposed atrocities committed by Hamas were just Israel shooting their own people, and it is
that's what it ultimately became. Because even though they were working under that is the Hannibal Directive of like, okay, here's on the books officially how this should work. It really was just a way to inflict mass casualties to blame on Hamas. You know, when again, like Jared just said, they did not have the ability to do those kind of things. So it obviously came from a friendly fire situation.
The I Unit also examined claims that widespread sexual violence had occurred on October 7th. It concluded, while isolated rapes may have taken place, there was insufficient evidence to support allegations that rape had been, quote, widespread and systemic. Like, do you see how lightly they're trying to be like, well, yeah, there probably could have, we can't really find evidence, though, to support widespread and systemic. When you when you read these statements, it sounds like that was like the whole point of the thing. October 7th was a rape party. Like, that's how they keep selling this. And to show it was widespread and systemic, we would need a lot more evidence than has come to light to date, and a lot more corroborative evidence that is being put out there, says Madeleine Rees, General Secretary of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. So, when is it disinformation/misinformation? Is it only when a Republican says it?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about why they've leaned into the rape so hard, I think, is because don't forget everything is about polling. Everything is about demographics, you know, and what things look like. So now that, you know, we have gone through the whole Me Too thing and that collapsed, and the Listen to Women thing and that collapsed, and there's more of this kind of movement of you know, how women should be treated medically and things like this, and they're tired of all, you know, everything saying just, oh, you've got a pole through your chest because you're fat, you know, this whole kind of women-ish movement. They are leaning into these whole rape stories to spook women and say, like, look at how bad they treat women.
Yeah, like, how are you going to argue against that? If you're like, well, they raped everybody, and you're supposed to be like, well, actually.
Yeah, right. Like, oh yeah, now you're like, oh, you're defending it. No. Like, that's the exact situation that these propagandists want to put you in. That our government, you know, because again, don't forget that they've always got people working way ahead. You know, it's not just during an election season. They want to see how things poll. They want to see how people feel about things. It's just the same way when you get a focus group about pizza or commercials or something. You know what I mean? Like, they're like, this pizza is too skinny. You know, so like you get the exact same thing. They are measuring the cultural feeling of the world and how women in the West are feeling about things, and how there's this kind of vague women's movement going on at the time. And they realize if they redline this story and be not just here, there were some rapes, not just a few bad actors, but mass rapes, pelvic destruction everywhere you look, and the babies. Don't even get me started on the babies. You know, like they push this narrative forward because now that they can very easily sway support for this. Oh, Israel better do something because they're obviously the good guys. They're going to stick those babies back together and undo the rapes. You know, so that's what, you know, they want the support for this. So when they're sending billions and billions of dollars, and the lower half of the country is washing into the sea, then they want you to still feel like, well, I'm supporting the right ones, because obviously Israel are the good guys out there all alone trying to just be Jewish in the homeland, you know. So all these things tie together in a propagandist nature, and that's where this comes from obviously the highest level. So a woman who wants to be president, again, here we go with the women thing. A woman who wants to be president repeats these completely debunked myths, literal myths that are a year old, that have been completely discredited, up, down, right, left, center, and then puts other women who obviously blindly support her into the mindset of like, well, if she thinks this is the right thing, I believe her. So, you know, it's all a game of, I don't want to say a game of politics, because it's really all a game of capital. It's all a game of capitalism. And again, going back to the beginning of the hour, what we said, America would not be sending billions upon billions of dollars to Israel to do this if there was not going to be a very lucrative return.
I wish they cared about, like, because she goes on here to mention like, I'll never stop fighting for the release of all the hostages, including 7 American citizens, living and deceased. It's like, well, you didn't care about, this was pre-October 7th, who is it that, a Palestinian American, so an American citizen, a journalist who got shot in the face by the IDF, that's all been fully investigated, and they're like, yeah, they did that on purpose, that was a hit job. Or the, like, 20-something-year-old Palestinian-American protester, again, another American citizen, American passport holder, who was killed by the IDF just like the other month. There have been dozens and dozens of American citizens just gunned down, like, aid, not even to mention aid workers. They're shooting Irish people, they're shooting, like, UN representatives, doctors, like, what do you care about? Oh, we have to go rescue our American citizens. You could save the most American citizens in this situation by just like stopping the weapons shipments.
Right.
And remember, that is all that we're pushing for, is just stop sending weapons. It's not go destroy Israel. It's not flip it around and start bombing Israel instead. It's if the weapon shipments stopped, negotiations would have to start. You would have to start becoming a decent neighbor to your friend, or they would just get fucking eaten by everyone around them, which I don't think they would do, because look at the amount of restraint that has been shown over the last almost 100 years of Israel basically having a little, you know, open air concentration camp over there, and the whole region is like, you better stop doing this, and nobody does shit. So, like, why do we think that? They're just waiting. They're waiting for the day where we very slightly slow down weapon shipments, and then Saudi Arabia is really gonna. Oh wait, Saudi Arabia is our big ally, and so is like most of the people
Iran.
in that
I think this is all just a way to try to get at Iran.
You got to keep Iran on the back foot. I heard people, I don't know if I necessarily agree with this, but they're like, if Iran actually had a nuke, it would be a stabilizing force in the area, because everyone would have to stop fucking around. In the same way that North Korea gets to exist as North Korea because they have a nuke. If they didn't have a nuke, oh, we'd be bombing North Korea. You'd hear about it all the time. Like,
and, you know, I think maybe the most...
If Pakistan didn't have a nuke, India would be bombing Pakistan. Even they already kind of do sometimes. It comes in and out of the news where India will just like bomb Kashmir or some shit, and it's like, oh Jesus.
Yeah.
All right, Pakistan has a nuke. We can't really fuck with them that much.
And then, you know, the thing about this whole thing is like they really like led with the rapes, and they wanted it to make it a women's issue, like, because your mind generally goes to, when you think of a rape, it's like, okay, that's man on woman violence, right? So, and they were able to disprove that these mass rapes, quote unquote, took place. Yet, it has been very much proven over this past year that IDF soldiers, including teenagers, are raping the prisoners. Like, you know, that is happening, and it goes into great detail. So there are rapes happening. They're happening, prisoners in custody, and it's not a secret. They have not hidden it. There was a big
fight. They went to a judge, and a whole bunch of people were like, "You do not indict these men. What they did was totally fine, and what they did was rape other men in jail."
But the thing is they said it's also one of the big issues is, you know, because we know that the IDF, like, you have to serve, so young people serve, and it's generally early on made up of very young, you know, men and women, but they had also said that young women were taking part in this, and not like because they were being like peer pressured into it, but they were like gleefully inflicting this, you know, torture onto these people. And that is part of the story too. And it's like, oh, well, that can't be true, because who would do that? That can't be true, because we play into these old, you know, the stereotypical dynamics of the situation. In the fake rapes are still getting, you know, all of the attention when the real ones are being completely overlooked. But that's the state of play right now. And I don't personally see this getting any better, but much, much worse. And really, I think that this is just to escalate a way to fight with Iran and establish a wider American presence in the Middle East, plus the resources.
The wars aren't meant to be won; they're meant to be ongoing.
Yeah,
And
because
we've kept
war
it going.
is commerce. War is an industry. It makes money. Like that is a
Yes.
corporation unto itself.
I do want to acknowledge because she like it's just this tonal it's just whiplash like where if you read this trying to make sense like so what's she actually trying to say, because then you get a paragraph: Hamas's terrorist attacks on October 7th launched a war in Gaza. I am heartbroken over the scale of working tirelessly, whatever, what was it, working round the clock, I think she said. I am heartbroken over the scale of death and destruction in Gaza over the past year. I thought it was going to be years, just a year. Tens of thousands of lives lost, children fleeing for safety over and over again, mothers and fathers struggling to obtain food, water, and medicine. It's like it's a natural disaster hit them or something. It just it is far past time for a hostage and ceasefire deal to end the suffering of innocent people. These deals have come about. So this is me now editorializing. These deals have been proposed several times and are shot down by Israel and/or the United States every single time. So, like, the fact that that line's in there is insane.
Yeah.
It is time for to end the suffering of innocent people, and I will always fight for the Palestinian people to be able to realize their right to dignity, freedom, security, and self-determination. So what she's saying there is, if it wasn't for Hamas, we would be everything would be totally chill in Palestine. Everything would be great, while not acknowledging that, like, why hasn't Palestine had any elections? Because they aren't allowed to. Why is Hamas the dominant political group in the area? Well, Israel funded them, continues to fund them. So it's like, if you really hate Hamas, you should be extra mad at Israel, because they would rather have had Hamas than the PSL, the one that runs the West Bank, which is kind of socialisty. So they really don't want that. So they have to. You find a group of the most the hyped up. I don't want to really use the word terrorist, because, like, if you're getting freaking genocided, I don't really think you're a terrorist if you fight against that.
Right.
But you get the people who are the most hype up, the most violent, the most ready to go do some shit, and then you fund them, and then you can turn around and go, look, they're run by psychopaths. We can do anything we want to them. Like, that's a color revolution, but it doesn't have the same kind of character in Palestine. But it's what the U.S. does all over the place. It's what the U.S. did in Cuba, like most of South America. Like, you'll find countries that are relatively stable, or would be, and then you find, all right, what political group is the most likely to do a bombing? All right, let's give them a bunch of money. Here's some bombs. We're the CIA. What's going on? And then, oh my God, you see how crazy it is in that country? We better move in and help out. And that's the procedure. We've done it for over a century at this point, and it's weird that people don't see the pattern. This shit is not even classified anymore. You can just read about everything the CIA was doing in the 60s, 70s, and at least some of the 80s.
80s, yeah. Yeah, no, it's completely true, and it's not a secret. And that kind of leads us into the other topic. It would actually be in their best interest to essentially pay off Americans with health care and a universal basic income, to say, okay, you guys are doing fine, so we're going to give all of our extra money over to Israel, okay? Because that would be exactly how you would turn people's mind away from it, by making them not see it's like us or them. Because right now, a lot of people are catching on to the idea that, this money is going out, but, half the country has been washed away. It's going to happen again. In 10 days, there's coming another hurricane. Yes. It's not going to stop. So, and it's going to get worse all the time. This is complete government negligence. And when I say negligence, I don't mean like we neglected it. Government negligence being we allocated all of our resources to making money off of war, so that the top echelon of us would benefit like motherfuckers from it. So because they don't put any value on poor people. And as more people become poor people and there's no middle class anymore, there's less and less emphasis to do anything for the citizens, because they don't see them as valuable contributors back to the system that is, they're going for the quick and the fast and the biggest paycheck. That's the whole thing. So it's the greed is what's winning. So it seems like, you hear about UBI and it's like, well, this is a pretty new topic. It's not. This is something that Martin Luther King Jr. lobbied for. This is something that, comes in a lot of different forms and fashions. There were a lot of people in the 70s and 80s that were trying to fight for this, trying to say, and then that ultimately led to things like WIC getting created, so pressuring the government into doing what they should be doing all along. And I'm not saying give people stuff so they turn a blind eye to other places. I'm just saying that strategically it would be in their best interest to do that. Because if Americans had universal health care, which would cost way less to the government than it does now, and if we had universal basic income, then and their needs were being met, at least at the basic level, they would not be, as readily dichotomizing things and saying, well, you just told us we can't have money, yet you just sent another bunch of $1 billion, and we're adding all these totals up and such, and figuring out this way, all this information, and we're getting, we're just getting, it's not in the government's best interest. I was just reading something in the chat. Someone asked, "Is this pre-recorded?" No, it's not. We're live. I just wanted to address that real quick.
I'm an AI. I'm not real.
Oh yeah, no, there's that. Oh, where it's like, we got the face filters. Why would we choose? I wouldn't choose this one if I was gonna do the filter. Anyways, no,
yes, hello, ICBM party.
Yeah, beep boop, beep boop. No, what I'm saying,
intercontinental ballistic missile party.
Right? Yeah, like no. What I'm no, what I'm getting at here though is. So it's not, my point is this is not a new concept. It's not that pie in the sky. It's just that we have to turn the narrative back to our own self as part of this. And I think there's been no better excuse than to look at how badly the climate disasters, which are, we're approaching climate collapse here, is happening, right? So so first of all, what is universal basic income? It's not a paycheck. A lot of people don't know about this, but in Alaska, they have a thing called a dividend. And it is where they get paid, all the citizens who live there full time get paid a little bit of money to extract the oil and gas from their state, from
because you live there, you all are supposed to have, like, as a citizen, you're supposed to have some kind of, quote, collective ownership, like, in the state land. Like, the state land trust is supposed to be, the citizenry, same thing with national parks. It's our land, our resources. So logically, when when value is derived from that land, it is distributed to the people who live there. Like, imagine if Texas did that. Holy shit.
Yeah. Well, see, I'm no expert on what they actually get as a payout, and I don't know if the market, if it's market value, if that changes or not, or if it's flat rate.
That's the rationale as to why it's not commie.
But yeah, right. But the thing of it is, the point I bring it up for is that money that you get monthly, bi-monthly, yearly, whatever that everybody gets. It is a supplement. It's not your full income. You're not going to live off of it, I would think. I would think most people couldn't. It's especially expensive to live in Alaska. For some reason, it's as if they can't get supplies there for some reason. It's like, come on. We can get bombs overnight to another fucking country. We can't get a turkey up to, Anyway,
if I'm not wrong, that's like basically essentially like trying to do not market pressure, trying to incentivize people to move there, because in the Cold War times, it's like, all right, that's why we wanted Alaska in the first place. We need a piece of territory that's as close to Russia as possible, and then, hey, we need some people here to increase the value of that land, and so then if they attacked Alaska, it'd be a bigger fucking deal. So
it's just a supplemental little thanks for living here and agreeing to let us pump your resources out situation. UBI is not very different from that, right? Again, that stands for Universal Basic Income. And if the government provided, let's just say, in a non-upside down world, if they provided this amount of money, we could structure it similarly. Say under a certain earning bracket that fluctuates with the market, would not, only certain people would be eligible, maybe, or maybe people above that earning bracket would be like really heavily leaned on, like to not take it, something to that degree. But what that would do is, because I've seen a lot of people being like, oh, well, good luck living on that, or now you can live on that, or immigrants, you get that a lot. But what it is you don't live on it. It keeps you alive. And there have been across the planet multiple studies done with private, funds that have been raised by different foundations and stuff. And I'm compelled to say the Phoenix Foundation because I've been rewatching MacGyver, which, okay, by the way, really, really holds up and is actually super great. But anyways, my point is various programs around the world, with money that has been raised by donors, wealthy donors and stuff, have always overwhelmingly positive results that show, whether it's give people an apartment or give people a monthly stipend or give people a weekly stipend of different amounts of money, it overwhelmingly shows, and they could be either, give it to homeless people who are literally experiencing homelessness or people just in low income brackets. And no matter where in the world it is, it works really well, because it turns out when you give people who don't have the resources they need to live, they do really well. And say that you give it to somebody who isn't in dire straits, like it's maybe like something close to middle class. Well, then they also end up taking that money, making sure that their basic needs are met, universal basic income. So that frees them up. They have better health overall because of their mental health is better for not stressing about how they're going to pay for things, where the market's going, the price of eggs, this and that, being able to afford things again. And it's not like they're going on vacations with this money and partying on it necessarily. And I think that's another big misconception. But it takes them to the point of, okay, well, if I know that the majority, let's say 80% of my bills are covered, I still go to work, this gives me extra income on my end. So that allows me to free up my time to invest back into the economy by potentially opening a business, starting a business, so these things have a lot of multiple ripples that really work really well economically and socially, because they have better health care. They don't have to spend as much money. If they don't have any health care and they're paying out of pocket, then they don't really have that, that issue is less of a concern. So they do better overall, as far as health and living is concerned. They can eat better food, obviously. And when we are facing these natural disasters that are going to be coming rapid fire from here on out, until, I don't know, everything just sinks into the ocean, these people who are told to evacuate, who can't evacuate, that gives them a potential open door to maybe do so. It's not a guarantee, obviously, but if you have money to evacuate, then go stay in a motel somewhere a few miles north or whatever, or to board your animals somewhere, or if you're going to stay, to buy flashlights and batteries and canned food and water and that, it becomes less of an emergency situation for people. There are less deaths overall. We see less resources having to go to fish these people out of the floodwaters in the end. So it just makes sense. It's something that just makes sense. And if you were able to couple that with universal health care, for instance, which again doesn't make the propaganda that people believe is so ridiculous, because these people with good jobs who are paying 20% of their paycheck for health care somehow believe that that's better than paying 4% out, so that then I'm not sure who these people are, but they seem to be, we run into the I've got mine-ism again. A lot of this comes down to the I've got mine-ism mentality, and not thinking about other people, not just because you can't afford to think of other people, but it always seems to be people who don't have anything to give are the ones who give. And the people that have plenty, the reason that they have plenty is because they never do and never did. And historically, and that's where the resistance comes from. Nobody wants anybody to benefit from something if they feel like they are more entitled to it. That's the classism, argument, I think, that we run up against. And obviously the government's not willing to do it, so it would take something like a general strike. It would take something, like a people's union of people banding together to say, oh, you've got all this money for war. We want to be able to eat and sleep comfortably indoors and live normal lives and get back to something, because it really only serves the economy to recreate that middle class experience that the 80s had, and back going all the way back to like the 50s post-war, scraping society down to nothing like it is now. Obviously, if you can get them to work as indentured slaves, that's always going to be best. But until this really starts affecting more and more people, and then saying like, oh, I never thought it could happen to me, then you're not going to, win very many allies in this argument. So if you take anything away from this, It would be you want to promote this idea to other people to say like, yeah, you would benefit, but other people would benefit too. People that really, really need to be benefiting from something like this. And as we see disasters getting worse, we can at least see some sustainability of how to get through it. I'm not saying it's a solution. It really still is a Band-Aid on a broken leg. Because obviously, if there's no world, there's no living in it. There's nothing to live on. So we have to have a planet to exist on. So what, the big headline is you stop the climate crisis, obviously, but there's no money in that. So that's why there's tons of money in war. And somebody brought in the chat, the war, and the bombs. This is its own ecological disaster. When it comes to the Far East experienced that, during Vietnam times. Like, they still deal with, physical ailments that generationally, because the environment is so toxic and so this is a generational issue that very easily, so this could solve a few of those problems and improve, at least to a small degree, living conditions for people, and help people in danger zones survive through those, danger zones. And if you don't, you have to live in Alaska to receive the dividend. But if you had a universal basic income, that would be, you live anywhere in America type of a situation to receive it. So if that's something you're just hearing about for the first time, or you've heard about it, you don't, not super clear about it, that's where it is. And if it's something that we could potentially get a candidate that we could push into it, I believe it's Jill Stein supports it, and I think we all know that Jill Stein is not going to win the election, but if they meet a certain threshold, that puts them in a more legitimate place. So it was a few episodes back I was talking about just vote for, if or if you want to, just to spoil the situation for everyone else, if you feel like you can't vote for the uniparty situation. Not that it's going to go anywhere, but if we got people that have the right ideas, even if they're still on the the bottom of the pyramid, where they're not going to be heard or seen as much as everyone else, and we know that the mainstream candidates aren't adopting the situation or even talking about something like universal health care, that's completely off the board. Universal basic income, completely off the board. You recognize that the Democrats aren't offering you anything either, and that's what we were talking about somewhat at the top of the hour. I think I'll give Jared a chance to get a word in here on this, but it's doable. It's doable, and it's scalable, and it wouldn't affect the economy negatively, but beneficially and positively.
So the other side of the balance sheet for something like something like handing out money to have any kind of effect is, I don't know, I don't have a 3-letter acronym for it, but the general prices of things need to be driven down, and I don't know if that means like literally caps or price controls in the way that we've seen them in the past, or if it's just as basic as ordering our economy towards production again, so prices naturally get driven down. If you say that, hey, we're spending all this money on XY war instead of here at home, people will point out, yeah, but it's not like if we didn't spend the money on Israel that we would suddenly magically be spending $8 billion here at home. And I'm like, you're correct, because like fundamentally, a lot of those billions it's just fake money. It's like money invented by banks to fund a war that, like, there's no production that accompanies that value. Basically like a big credit. It's like we raise our credit limit, but does that create more money, or does it just say we're fine with making more fake money? Which has the side benefit, if you're a psychopath, to lowering the value of the dollar, which then, of course, makes everything more expensive. Eggs aren't just $4 a dozen only because producers and stores have decided to charge more. That is a big piece of it. But also our currency is worth less and less because we keep printing non-existent money to give to the military-industrial complex for these wars. So if you instead had your economy geared toward production and you were actually creating value, like making things, infrastructure, food, housing, paying doctors, hospitals, whatever, actual things that are tangible. I know that rockets are tangible, but they don't
You
create
don't
like
benefit
value.
anyone,
They don't really create. You can't like can't eat a rocket. You can't.
right?
You could use those same resources better. But if you instead are gearing your economy towards production, and hey, good news, we have a lot to produce because we have to deal with the shifting climate. So we're going to have a lot of things to. You could build a lot of sea retaining walls, and you could shore up a lot of buildings that would get knocked over in a hurricane. There's a lot of production to be done here, and as the economy is gauged towards production and not nonsense war, the prices of things start going down. Your
Right.
value of your dollar starts going up. So if you have a combination of here's some emergency money so you don't just die, and actively working towards making things cheaper, just making life cheaper, offloading like your job is not supposed to have to pay for your health care. And
Right.
most employers would probably be pretty great with like, oh, cool, that's no longer an expense I have. Person with 20 people working for me, like that'd be awesome. The whole
I
idea of
wonder
a
why they don't lobby for it more, honestly. Like create their own kind of business owner union to represent their own interests and say, hey, we don't want to pay for it anymore.
it would make it a lot cheaper to employ people if people did not rely on their employers for like your basic necessities, because that whole thing happened because you're trying to force people into working.
Yeah.
Like if you from both sides, from the top and bottom, if you're raising the general income and lowering the general price of things, that's how you can end up with some increased happiness.
Yeah.
Because people will meme, hey, if you do $1,000 a month, that means your landlord's just going to increase rent by $1,000 a month. And I'm like, you know what? You're probably right. So how do you combat that? And there are ways, but
Yeah.
just
These
blanket
things aren't
cutting checks.
complicated. They're certainly not as complicated as they want you to believe that they are. Like, oh, government, the wheels turn slowly. They don't have to. This stuff is very basic and employed in many other countries with great success. You know,
China doesn't actually have universal health care, but health care is so cheap there, it may as well be. Your
Right.
doctor visit's going to cost like single-digit dollars, so it's like, oh no, I have to go pay for the doctor, but it's just not a big deal. It's not free, but you don't get bankrupted if you get cancer in China. It's like, oh no, I have to pay $120 this year. Oh.
as you're saying, we would essentially be generating our own capital. So by taking all of this money,
yeah.
This is almost like, you know, the outsourcing of industry that happened, you know, in the 70s and 80s that killed unions in the first place. You know, this is and gave China the chance to rise to what it is, you know, by happenstance. But we're essentially outsourcing this war so that a certain amount of people make money while forgetting all the people here, you know, and then telling everybody, oh no, your neighbors are fine with this. Everybody in the rest of the country is fine with this. You are on the outside, and that sucks for you because you're wrong. So if we could, you know, get our mind back, and by creating unions, or rebuilding unions, we're getting there. And of course, unions aren't the ideal situation. They still, in essence, serve the empire, right? It's not, you know, you're not in a communistic party, you're not a working party, which is the ideal.
It
but
becomes like a privatized kind of like you make your own. Class dynamics just reproduce themselves within worker unions, which is why you'll see it's a weird conflating interests. Where I definitely support the frickin' dock workers going on strike. The dock workers strike had a loophole in it, or not loophole, but a thing written out. It's like, we will absolutely still ship every weapon, though.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to ship anything except military-industrial complex shit. We're definitely not, because I mean, on one hand, they know their strike is over immediately if they threaten that. There's no way they're going to be allowed to go on strike. They're all going to go to jail. But at the same time, it's a big fight was over stopping automation. We kind of need automation to make our ports more able to process more cargo. Like, we do need to get more shit through our ports, but under our current system, if you add automation, you remove jobs. You pay people less. You get down to what the railroad has, where it's like 1.5 guys per 6-mile long insane freight train. Like, hey, we got one person working that now.
And
that's
that
what you
is
eventually
probably
get down to.
Yeah, well, that's probably the strongest argument for UBI. Is as AI rises, as automation rises, we have to cap these things off, because those things inherently are not the problem. How they are going to be implemented by, you know, bosses and
you
used
reduce
to
work
replace,
hours and keep pay the same.
Right.
You pay
Yes.
somebody the same wage to go work an hour a week, and that
Right.
sounds insane to us right now, but it's not even. If you just look at the productivity numbers from the 50s to today, 1 hour of my labor in 2024 does the same amount of productivity as like 90 hours of
Right.
1950s labor. We
Yes.
should all be working a day a year.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. That's again why we're seeing so much push against people saying like, oh well, if you want to work remotely, then you should be willing to accept a lower paycheck. That is not a benefit, and that is not something you should be, in a situation of doing. The people are the issue here. And yeah, it's like, yeah, you could take a lower paycheck if you had a universal basic income and everybody knew it, and if you had healthcare, you didn't have to pay for.
I want the dock workers working from home, just operating the drone camera, like, all right, and got the box, and cool, going to the kitchen.
And that is something that we should work towards as entitlement as people who live here. If we're this quote unquote greatest country in the world and we can do anything, stop trying to make money off of war, invest back in your people like China did, make something worth doing, and make something that's people find enthusiastic about, where they can have a life outside and healthcare outside of all of this stuff, because physical labor by people is becoming less and less needed. And that is a good thing. We don't need people breaking their backs doing something, moving something back and forth for 40 years that a fucking robot can do. That is the whole idea.
All the shitty jobs should be done by robots, and we could do that tomorrow, except then, like, you wouldn't have anybody doing jobs, and I'm like, oh, that's fine, don't worry about that. You can just take all of the value that is created by these robots and just basically hand it out, basically overpay the shit out of a lot of people to do very, very little, and then there you go. That's what society, that's what the next step is going to be. The only question is how many wars we have to have first.
And robots can build bombs too, and they already do, just FYI. But the thing of it is, it's like, how are we going to pay for it? Robot tax. These companies, these corporations want to go, get rid of the human workforce for robots who don't need vacations and unions and holidays and sick days. Fine. Tax the shit out of them. You got money for everything. That's
it will result in the collapse.
So easy.
It'll result in a collapse of a lot of the cronyism that we see right now, and not because anyone has to agree morally one way or the other, just because that's how it's like a math problem. That's just how it's going to work out. Yeah. You're going to get to automation, and that will inevitably make this kind of like weird tower of fake money begin collapsing, which is why we're more and more desperate to keep the wars going.
We will probably end up in a crisis situation where joblessness just rockets upward, until the government is willing to cave and say, all right, fine. You can work less, and here's some money in healthcare or whatever.
The government's one of the most wasteful freaking aspects of American society. It's a humongous amount of our productivity goes into it. A humongous amount of our treasure goes into keeping this bullshit apparatus going. So I'm kind of I talked more smack about the general anarchist idea of just reduce the government and things will improve. I'm like, you know what? I don't think it would get worse at this point. Looking to talking about at the beginning of the hour, people just taking it upon themselves to bail people out in North Carolina and these other flood-devastated regions right now. They are proving more effective than the government response, which is to have a bunch of people sit around and we're waiting for orders. Yeah, FEMA says you can't do this. All right. Oh, you aren't buying from an approved contractor, so your donations, we don't want that. But it just gets in the way at every possible step now because they're evil. Just because you have to go through this big dumb system that we set up that doesn't work.
Yeah. So in conclusion, we have to nullify the government. It's ultimately have to do, because we are going to see these great big changes coming super, super fast. And right now we're right at the beginning of it, so people aren't affected by it in a massive, massive way. I know I've talked about how my income in workforce has been affected by it, because now your textbooks are being written by AI. So good luck there if you're in the medical field.
Nicolette, I got to run to the airport to get my suitcase from last night.
Right. Yeah. He's got busy things to do. Most of the time, people have to buy tickets to hear from Mr. Mayor Jared. So you're lucky that he's here anyways. So yeah, I'm going to close out anyways. We've talked enough of you guys. So we will see you all next week. Thank you so much for being here. Wish Jared luck that he will get his items unscathed. And we will see you again next week for another discussion on why we live in hell and how we can fix it. So take care, everyone, and we will see you again soon. So bye-bye.